Security in Serbia. My name is Karsten Friis. I'm with you from Oslo, Norway, and I'll be moderating this panel. I'm also a former employee with OSCE mission to Serbia, so I'm glad we do this in cooperation with them. Now, let me just introduce the panelists, and then we will do as on the other panels. They will have 5 minutes each to present their papers, and then the discussant will respond and then reply, and of course, it will open from Q&A from the audience. So, the distinguished panel is as follows. Peja Petrovic, he's a program director at the Belgrade Center for Security Policy, where he has worked now since 2006. And his interest throughout his career has been primarily on privatization of security and on the intelligence service reform and on violent extremism. Next is Tena Prelec. She's a research fellow at the Department of Politics and International Relations at the University of Oxford. She has a PhD from Sussex University, and she works on centers on anti-corruption, money laundering, reputation laundering, with a focus on Western countries' role in the global dynamics of corruption. And then in the studio alone is Saša Đorđević. He is a PhD student at the Faculty of Criminal Justice in Slovenia, and he's part of the global initiative against transnational organized crime, working as a field coordinator for Serbia and Montenegro. And he has also worked many years at the Belgrade Center for Security Policy. And then our discussant is Dr. Vladimir Đorđević, an assistant professor at the Department of the Territorial Studies at the Faculty of Regional Development and International Studies at Mendel University in Brno in the Czech Republic. And he's also a research fellow at the Strategic Policy Institute in Bratislava, Slovakia. And he has his PhD from Masaryk University, also in Brno. All right, that was a very brief bio introduction. You can read more details on the website for the Belgrade Security Forum. But with no further ado, I would like to pass the word first to Peja, Mr. Petrovic, to give your short version, the highlights of a paper in 5 minutes, and I'll be tight on the watch. So don't step over the time, please. Thank you. Peja. I do not see or hear Peja. If he disappeared, we can pass the word to somebody else. Okay, Tena, are you there? Awesome. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So the paper I'll be presenting today is not actually directly related to corruption and state capture. It speaks about the political narratives and the way these narratives are used to further political ends in the Western Balkan countries. And they relate to the use of the narrative of the help from abroad, the economic help from abroad, including economic investments. And I'll be focusing on the case of Serbia. Now, it is my contention that these political narratives actually accompany and reinforce some of the dynamics of state capture.
Tena, the moderator lost you there.
So my paper starts from an observation that although the countries of the Western Balkans receive more investments from Western countries, mainly from EU countries, actually the investments that are channeled from non-Western countries, such as China or Russia or the Emirates, are presented to much more from far. They are much more highlighted and underlined. And the best example of that is this spring when the Serbian president, Aleksandar Vučić, labeled the EU help for the COVID-19 crisis as a fairy tale, while at the same time presenting the help coming from China as extremely important, kissing the Chinese flag, and speaking about China as our brothers, our saviors. Now, this salvific narrative, this narrative of the help coming from abroad, of these friends coming from abroad as saviors, is not the first time that is used by the Serbian political leadership. And I'm referring specifically to an actor that was very important in the early days of the ascent of the Serbian Progressive Party, led by Aleksandar Vučić, to power. So the Serbian Progressive Party was founded in 2008, but it wasn't until 2012 that its big ascent to power came by. In that period, so in that period from 2012 until 2015, more or less, there was at the same time the presentation of a huge crisis in which Serbia finds itself. And that was the economic adversity, the economic crisis that was that was also a consequence of the deep consequences of the global economic crisis of 2008, 2009 that had hit Serbia. So this crisis was underlined and highlighted. And at the same time, the SNS, the Serbian Progressive Party, and Aleksandar Vučić in particular have presented the solution to the Serbian public. And this solution was partially also coming from abroad, so from the United Arab Emirates, which is the actor that I'm speaking about in this moment. So empirically, I've carried out discourse analysis over media coverage from 2012, which is the year when the Serbian Progressive Party profiled itself more strongly as the dominant party in Serbian politics, until today. And basically, through my analysis, I trace the fact that this salvific action of friends coming from abroad was initially more strongly associated with the United Arab Emirates, whereas later, from Okay, I'm back. So from 2015, 2016, this narrative was attributed more strongly to another actor that was becoming profiling itself as more important in Southeastern Europe, and this is China. So while empirically I show how this narrative of the salvific help from abroad is attributed to different actors in different moments as it's convenient for the Serbian leadership, I think that tells us also something interesting in terms of theory. And I have put that in relation with the theory called the ontological security that has been developed in the field of international relations as ontological state security. And this theory postulates that in times of crisis, political leaders, they bridge what is presented to the public as a security challenge through the preservation of state ontological security, by providing a sort of shelter from the storm, provided routine and familiarity, and by presenting themselves as the anchors of stability and prosperity. Now, the interesting twist in the material that I analyze is that whereas usually the salvific help is attributed to the political leaders themselves, in this specific case, we have this foreign help coming from abroad that is this the source of the political stability, and therefore is the source that is able to preserve state ontological security. However, what I argue is that the important part of it is that the conduit through which it happens is the Serbian leadership itself. So my analysis is able to advance and contribute to this state ontological security theory by basically expanding our imaginary of who is doing the saving. And actually, at the end of the day, it is always the domestic political actors that do it. But in this specific case, we have an external help from abroad that is presented as this anchor of stability that is able to bring to save the Serbian nation. Okay, so in terms of contributions, one interesting aspect of this analysis is that it gives us some insights into why Serbian politics, Serbian foreign policy is so erratic. There have been many articles, analysis penned on that. Why is it that in this moment it's with Russia, now with China, now it's with the US, there's always the EU in the background? What I argue is that actually there is not much point in analyzing what is exactly the grand plan of Serbian foreign policy, because at the end of the day, it relates in each moment to that actor that the political leadership is able to reconduce to their own salvific power. And finally, what does this tell us in terms of the state capture mechanisms? Now, in the whole topic of investments from abroad, it is by now well established that there is the possibility for these investments to contribute to state capture mechanisms through what is termed as corrosive capital. So the term of corrosive capital. Okay, picking back from corrosive capital, which means that it's investments that exploit governance weaknesses and make them wider. Now, it is my contention that within this wider topic of investments from abroad, we have, on the one hand, this mechanism of corrosive capital, and on the other, we have this mechanism of the political narratives that accompanies it. And basically, it exposes this state capture playbook, if you wish, within the realm of foreign investments in the Western Balkans. So on the one hand, you get the money from abroad also partially to reinforce your own elites through these corrosive capital mechanisms. And on the other, you sell it to your population that it is actually for their benefit because you are saving them from what is presented as a crisis, as a situation of extreme emergency. So I would argue that that within this wider topic of state capture, it is not only on the mechanisms of financial exploitation that we need to focus our attention to, but it is also to be seen within this wider context of how it's presented to the public, both domestic and abroad. I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Tena. I was a nice moderator. We pushed the 5 minutes a little bit, but it's really interesting what you talked about, and you disappeared a few times. So I hope the audience captured the really interesting focus you have on China, ontological security, and also the financial part. I think for the sake of safe security, so to speak, technology, I think I'll pass it now to Saša, who is sitting in Belgrade in the studio. And so you're out next, and please try to stick to your 5 minutes, Saša.
Okay, thank you, Karsten, for this kind introduction. So I will try to stick on the 5 minutes. So basically, me and Professor Đorđević, who is also co-author of this paper, find out motive to research state capture in Serbia 2 years ago because the European Commission was not so clear in explaining how state capture actually influenced the EU enlargement process of Serbia. Especially, it was unclear how business elites take advantage by reshaping laws, regulation, and procedures for their own business and providing like illicit gains to the public officials. So, which is actually the definition of the state capture, original definition of the state capture by the World Bank. And actually we decided 2 years ago that we want to understand why is the state capture a new phenomenon, because after European Commission published the report in 2018 that the Western Balkans shows clear elements of state capture, including organized crime and corruption links, we actually wanted to provide answers on 5 main questions. So first question is basically, is Serbia a capture state? Second question is, who capture state in Serbia, how and what are the mechanisms, and in the end the fifth question was related what is the role of security sector and criminal justice system in capturing the state, on specific example on Serbia. And because of that we actually talked with 14 people, so political scientists, civil society activists, journalists, sociologists, politicians, also business company, trying to understand why is state capture so important to the enlargement of Serbia to the European Union, and how actually people in Serbia understand this phenomenon of state capture. So basically, two elements of state capture, which is political corruption, and the second element is influence of informal networks, are basically visible not only for this government, but also if you go back into the past, in the last few decades. And actually, if you look, for example, on the study by Zoran Đinđić from the 80s about Yugoslavia's unfinished states, we can also see elements of the state capture. And actually, state capture on the example of Serbia was like a process where political elites capture institutions basically in order to gain funds and power. So basically this is the answer of the first question, and when we discussed with people about state capture and who is basically the capturer of state, giving three possible solution options, so basically political elites, business elites, and finally organized crime groups, there is a consensus with people that actually political elites are the main actor in Serbia in the last, from democratic changes in 2000 in capturing the state. And main motive for that is basically money and funds, and actually wanted to make some kind of rank list what is the first, and the most of the people that we discussed during the research said the money is the main reason of capturing the state. But basically, when we ask what is the understanding of state capture, is not like strictly definition of the World Bank that business actually reframing legislation and roles and bribing public official because of the profit. It's more broad in a sense that actually state capture involve different political problems that Serbia faced in the last 20 years to 2 decades. So basically there are 5 main problems. So the first problem is basically non-existence of political pluralism, especially in the last 5 years. The second issue is weak judiciary. Third issue is unbalance of power. Fourth basically problem that Serbia faces is connected with creating environment of impunity in Serbia. And the last one is connected with the rule of law, with the application of the rule of law principle, and overall democratic backslide in situations. So we can see that state capture is understanding in Serbia like a process that actually influenced the democratic capacity of Serbia. And the role of security sector and criminal justice system is very important, and we can find also links with what's going on in situation, for example, in North Macedonia or in South Africa. So basically police, intelligence, and prosecution are tool for political elites for power making. Basically, war it's also like a source to preserve impunity from the criminal prosecution because of different wrongdoings. That's the main reason why actually, and we can find out those links both in South Africa and in North Macedonia. So in the end, I think it's very important if we broaden this discussion about the state capture, not only in Serbia, but also in the Western Balkans. It's also very interesting to link with the political economy area and the phase that how actually state capture influencing the the public good, which is the term connected with the political economy, and for the, so to say, uncaptured state in Serbia, it's necessary to actually strong judiciary system. So without strong prosecution, it's almost impossible to uncapture a state, as we can see for the example from the South Africa, where actually prosecutor published one report about the state capture in South Africa, and after that it followed up with different mechanism for resolving political and informal links that output is basically output is basically state capture. So thank you, Chris. That's all.
Thank you so much, Saša. Very good, Saša. Thank you so much. So let's hope, Pedja, are you with us now? And you can talk about security sector and state capture. There you are. And the sound, we can't hear you. At least I can't hear you. We had some problems with the sound before the session started, and now it seems to be it again. I don't know if, I'm sure some technical people are working on it. Okay. I wonder if we should, since there are some technical issues with Pedja, we should give let's allow the discussant to start commenting on the two papers you just heard from to save time. And then hopefully we will resolve Pedja in the meanwhile. If that's okay with you, Vladimir, I would like to pass it word to you and you can comment on the two papers you just heard.
I hope you can hear me and see me. I'm sending greetings from the Czech Republic, from Brno, from Mendel University. As you can already probably see, I had to stay at home because the situation here is, let's say, developing in a wrong direction in terms of the number of infected people. As for the papers that I have read and asked to comment on, Tena Prelec's paper, to start with, addresses the issue of investments in foreign assistance that both Serbian President Vučić and his Serbian Progressive Party have, in essence, abused in their, I would say, political discourse in the story they're trying to sell to the Serbian people, in order, of course, to cement their dominant position on the domestic political scene in this so-called steel partnership, as they like to call it in Serbian, between China and Serbia. I appreciate the fact that the author rightfully points to a number of issues in this regard. She applies the theory of ontological security, and she basically manages to show the importance of the role the political elites' discourses on this foreign economic assistance have actually played in the construction and legitimation of these state capture practices by those very elites. This is a very interesting point Tena is making. I also like the fact, or I appreciate the fact that when applied this particular theoretical framework, she has also managed to show just how erratic actually the Serbian foreign policy, I would say, I dare to say, not only in recent years may seem. She also points to another very impact that Serbian elites have in recent years been geared towards highlighting their own supposedly salvific actions of this particular discourse of, as the author herself says, I quote, foreign friends coming and economic Serbia, end of quote. In that respect, I would like to add, and I have really enjoyed her paper, a question on the Chinese role in Serbia. So how does she actually see this sort of Chinese influence see it as a sort of a thing that will be strengthening in months and years to come, particularly when when you take into consideration the ongoing COVID crisis. And then, as for the second paper, the one by Predrag Petrović, he takes a different angle when compared to the first paper. He introduces an analysis on state capture, looking at these states security services in Serbia. He also highlights the acquisition of power that has basically enabled Serbian political elites to kind of successfully control state security services for, of course, the means and ends of their own. And I particularly enjoy the fact that he discusses conditions, mechanisms, and factors in this particular regard, showing that Serbia has, in essence, sort of backtracked in terms of the quality of democracy, in terms of democratic political order, and to quote the author himself, is sliding towards autocracy. I'm pretty sure Predrag will, in a couple of minutes, hopefully, if we will be able to hear then his own paper. And Peđa, if possible, I would like you to answer my question on SSR reform. So that means security sector reform in Serbia. What are main challenges and issues in this respect in months or years perhaps to come? And last but not least, the paper by Saša Đorđević, who has already presented it to you, does or takes an angle relatively similar to the one that Peđa has taken in his paper, but does so by tracing the state capturing effort 2003. So that is the year when Đorđević, at the time Serbian Prime Minister, was assassinated. I appreciate the fact that he basically analyzes these sort of motives, roles, and actors in respect to the state capture, and he pays particular attention to the police and prosecution, as he has already mentioned. I also appreciate the fact that a lot of primary data was actually or has been collected by him, which I think makes his research quite interesting. I believe all three papers sort of present contribution to the field, perhaps particularly the paper by Predrag, because there has not been a lot of research in this regard. And in that respect, I would like to ask Peđa, how important were these interviews for you in terms of the data gained, and in respect to your initial suspicions of state capture in Serbia, because I'm pretty sure you had certain initial suspicions on how this state capture actually looks like, and in terms of criteria perhaps used, what sort of criteria you decided on, you relied upon when selecting interviewees. So these are my comments. I hope I have been, Karsten, brief enough, and I hope you have managed to hear me and see me well. So I'm signing off and greeting all of you from Brno, Czech Republic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Vladimir. Okay, let's try Peđa one more time. You can both present the paper and also then respond to Vladimir's comments right away if we have him with us. Let's see. Okay, we see you. Can we hear you? No, we can't. Damn. That's very unfortunate. Okay, I'll let the technical people keep working, and I'll pass the word to Tena, and then Tena can respond to the comments, and then also Saša. And in the meantime, hopefully, maybe we had a mobile phone or something, we can get Peđa's voice as well. Thank you. Tena, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Vladimir, for summarizing my paper better than me, I think, and for your very useful comments. I hope that this is now going to protect me from further technical issues. So about your question of how I see the development of Serbian-Chinese relations, I do think that that they will keep being strong for the time being and for the foreseeable future. That's the long and short of it. So I mean, the thing is that we had, there were some doubts. There were some doubts cast on whether China is still so important for Serbia in the wake of the Washington agreement signed at the White House in September, when one of the clauses basically had cast some doubt on whether Huawei would be used in Serbia. So because Serbia had officially signed this agreement in which a clause said that these untrustworthy providers should not be used in Serbia. But I do think that in the bigger picture, these ties that have started developing more strongly in the second half of the 2010s are here to stay. I mean, it is important to keep in mind that relations between Serbia and China have been there for a while, even during former Yugoslavia. But whereas in the period, from 57 to 2008, you had 39 agreements within the two. In the latter period, from 2009 until today, you had 59 agreements. So it's many, many more. The economic collaboration has intensified immensely, and it has started during the previous government, so under Boris Tadic. But as for many other, I would say, mechanisms, including mechanisms of state capture, the current Serbian government is doing everything better, faster, stronger, as one of their, the campaign slogans also defined. So there is a very strong relation between the two that has also worrying overtones, not only in terms of the governance weaknesses, the potential for patronage networks, the potential for rent-seeking practices, the complete non-transparency within which these investments take place, but also, for instance, on the very grave, potentially, consequences for the environment. We have two huge investments in Smederevo and Bor in heavy industry in Serbia that had environmental problems also before the Chinese investment, but now the environmental issues in those cities, and not only those cities, have increased incredibly. So the population there are really living within a health hazard. Now, what is important to highlight is that this is not only a malign influence from China, as we often define it, and the way that it's often framed in the West is the malign first and foremost a culprit that allows for such investments and such practices to take place. So yeah, I hope I addressed the question and that I wasn't breaking up too much.
Thank you, Tena. Now it's really interesting, and I 20 questions I would like to ask you, but we don't have time. So Saša, I would like you also to be able to respond to Vladimir. And if I may add then a little bit, I mean, are we seeing kind of back to the future? How many parallels do we see to the former Yugoslavia when this state capture? Is it kind of return to the old system, to the old rule, or is it something new?
Okay, so thank you, Karsten and Vladimir, for comments and questions. So I think we are backing to the roots. So at the moment, and the situation is very similar, like situation during the 90s and maybe even before, where we have one strong political parties without good opposition and weak institutions. So basically, the situation is very, very similar to the situation during the 90s. But right now, I think because the political environment wants to be stable, and this is why actually we don't have any conflict possibilities in the future. But like everything, like connections, dots, informal networks, so everything is very, very, very similar to the 90s. But what is important that actually elements of state capture are not connected only with the current government. So basically, if we look into the past, in the last 20 years, and the activities and the work of all four powers ruled by Serbia from 2000 for 20 years, so in the last 2 decades. So basically, we can see that they use the same elements of ruling, but the intensity is different. So, but basically, if we want to look like what are the crucial political activities or situation in the last 20 years for state capture, so basically the first is like assassination of the president of the government in 2003. The second, like development, is like political capture of the National Security Council in 2008. And the third moment is basically like consolidation of the power of the current government based on the narrative of fighting organized crime and corruption, and that was in the period from 2012 and 2014. So basically, these are the three moments. But if you look like books from the history, that actually some like elements of informal networks and elements of political corruption in a different way, in a different perspective, was present also and before the wars. For the question on Vladimir, what are the criteria for interviews? But basically, in this paper, we look like there is a historical perspective. So we look like people who are they have knowledge in the political system, like political scientists, but also sociologists. And also, we want to check with the journalists, which is one for the political side, and the other journalist is for the economy, how these elements of state capture actually involve, what is the impact on the economic business, etc. So, and basically, because the third topic was what is the role of the criminal justice and security sector, we also speak with the police officer and also with one politicians. So basically, we wanted to different criteria to understand how people perceive state capture in Serbia is actually the right term. And actually, in my opinion, I think the state capture is maybe not the right term, because the elements that we are speaking about are completely fit for some other environment. And maybe this could be even bigger issue. But if we look also in the past, there are too many research about the state capture. So like even in 2001, in 2007, but after the report of the European Commission, the reports about the state capture, not only in Serbia, but also in the Western Balkans, are actually growing up. And it's connected with that institutional approach, like weak institutions doesn't allow to institution work in the right way and to provide public good for citizens, which is the main role of the country. So I speak too much. That's enough.
Thank you. Well, great, Saša. Look, we must give Pedja one more chance, and I hope if you manage to get him to talk, we will allow to push our a little bit beyond time, so you get the chance to speak. So Pedja, please, let's try again. Okay. I don't hear Pedja. If you don't hear him in Belgrade either. I don't know what this is. I'm sorry. Okay, it looks like it didn't work with technology today. The good news is that Pedja is in Belgrade and he is around. He will have other opportunities in Belgrade Security Forum, I'm quite sure. He's been there before. And his research is really good, as Vladimir said. It's one of the most interesting papers. So I recommend everybody to keep an eye on that and see it when it's being published. Saša, you said at the end that maybe state capture is not even a good enough term. Maybe it's something broader. And well, maybe you all should go back to the basic political philosophy about the divisions of power and a very basic political science. What is it? What was the insight in the first writers of democracy? And maybe there are something we could take with us, some kind of concepts and theories from that first political thinkers that we had in the Europe and the West. So with those words, I would like to thank you all for watching and listening, and apologize for the small technical hiccups. That's how it is in these Corona days. I'm sure we have all seen that before. And good luck with the rest of the Belgrade Security Forum. There are many interesting panels left. So stay tuned and see you again next year. Bye-bye.